What is up, podheads? Back with another episode of the Podioslave podcast. My name is Tony. I am joined by Anthony, and Podioslave Goes International is back for another episode here. I was trying to think, how many bands or people have we talked to that weren't in the United States at the time of the interview? Because tonight's another one.
It's another one. Let's take inventory. Scott Russo of Unwritten Law was not in the
Mexico.
U.S.
Yep.
He was in Mexico when we chatted with him way back.
Yeah. Half Me,
Grove Street.
Frank Turner. Yeah.
So there's been a handful.
Yeah.
And tonight we had, I don't know where in Europe, but John Henry, Darkest Hour. That was fun.
Somewhere in Europe, baby. And Tyler from Youth Fountain. He's in Canada. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. We're not in Canada, even though people think we are. But yeah. Yeah, we had John Henry from Darkest Hour. Great conversation. Great new album comes out this Friday, Perpetual Terminal on MNRK Heavy. It's always fun to do these. I know I'm a broken record with that, but it is. Like I have woke up this morning excited to have this conversation because we're talking to somebody we'd never talked to before on the cusp of their 10th album, which is a feat that not a lot of bands can say they've done. And they sound just as fresh and as good as ever. So yeah, man, really, really cool stuff.
I echo everything you said, and that's one of the best things. This is one of the best things about doing this podcast is you don't know what's around the corner. You know, you really don't. I mean, bands are putting out new albums all the time. They're going on tours. People are reuniting. Then there's folks from bands that are broken up that you can still chat with. So when we, linked up with John for this, it was someone that, we've seen for 21 years or whatever it is, listen to the music for that long. And and most importantly, I love the catalog. Like I love Darkest Hour. Tony and I were chatting before this, like the DVD, Party Scars and Prison Bars. I think for your money, that's one of the best music DVDs of all time. It's funny. It's got the live footage. It's them. It's Darkest Hour. And all these years later to have a chance to interview someone like John it's why we do it. It's why we do it. It's the unknown around the corner. It's the passion for the music. And then there's the newness too, because you get this new album coming out Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out Tim and Adam Splitter for thinking of us to make this combo happen. They've been good to us over the years here now too. And I say years because we're almost 4 years in. So another cool conversation that again you just didn't know 5 days ago that it was possible, and then now it's in the can, and we've had a bunch of these, and we continue to have really, really great combos, and this was another one. So yeah, hey, if you like what you hear, tell a friend. I mean, we don't do this a lot, but it's at the end of the episode. No one ever listens to it, but tell a friend, please. Go in and rate us. And yeah, let's jump into our conversation with John from Darkest Hour.
John Henry, Darkest Hour, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is exciting. We're super excited for this, and I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording. We've been doing this for 4 years. Darkest Hour has come up in conversation, my guess, 2 or 3 times, but the most memorable, and you've been around a while, John. I'm gonna dig your memory banks. Darkest Hour came up when we had Brian Fair from Shadows Fall Overcast on probably 100 episodes ago. And I don't remember the context, but he brought up a show where Overcast played with Darkest Hour down in DC. It was probably 96, 97. He said it was in some squat. First time ever meeting you guys. And you guys asked the Overcast dudes to borrow equipment, to borrow some cabs or whatever. And they say yes, thinking you don't have gear. But turns out you had gear, you just wanted full stacks. And to quote Fair, he's like, I fucking love and hate those guys. So you remember that?
As soon as you started that story, I remembered it. I think it was actually Baltimore. And yeah, it was like, I don't know if it was Charm City Art Space, but it was pretty much like a squat that there's like, like an abandoned building or something. And yeah, I remember like, back in the day, it was funny. We were so one of our main influences is Damnation AD from DC. And they just always had like a million amps on stage. So we were always like, we wanted to be them so bad. So, anywhere we would play, if it was a basement or somewhere just where like full stacks are just completely unnecessary, we were just like, all right, we need as many as possible. And I remember that, I forget the guitar player from Overcast's name, but he was like, he got mad at us and like yelled at us because he's like, what the fuck? You didn't need that shit, you know?
But
like,
you
oh,
did.
we did, but we didn't need it, you know?
Exactly. You're just trying to fill up the space, right?
Exactly.
That's amazing. So was that a thing back then? Like you just kind of slow played it until people just started letting you borrow stuff so you could, you know, blow people's eardrums out?
That was a pretty isolated incident. Like we usually used to carry all, you know, way too many guitar cabs, way too many amps with us. So yeah, that wasn't a normal thing. But we did normally play with way too many amps. Now we just do like a stack or whatever.
Well, we weren't around for, like, we're a little younger than you, maybe a few years. So we weren't around for that era, and we're from Maine, so it's not like we were seeing you guys in the late 90s. But one of my favorite music DVDs ever is the Party Scars and Prison Bars thrashography you guys put out. And there's footage from your first show from 95 in that. And everyone's so young, it's in like a gym. Yep. And we're talking almost 30 years ago. So like the John in that video, did he see any of this coming, this 30 years in a metal band?
Not at all. Not at all. I guess I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life back then, but I never thought that, you know, the band would be anything more than just like a hobby. And I mean, back then, and that we were, you know, part of this like DIY hardcore scene, it was very anti-rock star, you know, it was very much like, you know, we would never think about having guitar solos or a light show or any of this kind of stuff in our music. That we ended up being like, hey, you know, we want to put on a good show for people. And so we ended up incorporating that stuff into it. So yeah, I mean, you know, everyone changes, what you want out of life, what you need out of life changes. And I think that, you know, when we started getting the opportunity for touring, I was doing like community college, wasn't really into it. And then all of a sudden, you know, Mike's like, hey, we got this offer to do like a full US tour. And I was like, all right, I'm dropping out of school. Like,
Amazing.
Right?
This is my life now. And as soon as I got the kind of the taste of like touring, traveling around, you know, not soon after, you know, after that, we went to like Europe for the first time. And after that, I was pretty much just, you know, hooked. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life.
And I mean, 30 years in, just about now. So you made that happen, which is pretty amazing stuff, because that's not easy to do. I mean, going 5 years and putting a couple records out is not easy to have anybody take notice. So for you to be able to pull it off for this long is pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, an addiction almost. It's you know, it's really hard once you like live the life. It's hard to get out. You know, I know so many people who have done it and gotten burnt out and quit, and then, you know, years later you talk to them and they're like, man, I wish I could still be doing this. And so yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky and you know, grateful to be able to still do it.
What drew you in? Because like DC, obviously we know, like, you know, more on the punk hardcore punk side, you know, the DC scene or whatever. You guys started in 95. What drew you in? Were you listening to metal? Were you going to shows? Or
I was listening to and it's funny you have the Dookie poster there. That was you know, that was actually kind of how I got into like punk rock. You know, it wasn't you know, I ended up discovering all this cool DC music, but my beginnings were much more humble. You know, it was like I heard, you know, saw a Green Day video and I was like, oh, what's this? And I started looking into it, and then I discovered like Operation Ivy. I was like, oh man, I like this even better. And then I started discovering hardcore through some friends, you know, and I discovered some old cool, because I got into hardcore like old school and new school at the same time. Like I got into Gorilla Biscuits and Earth Crisis like at the same time, because Gorilla Biscuits was kind of like, you know, 10 years before my time, but Earth Crisis and Integrity and all that early Victory metallic hardcore stuff was like what was happening when I got into music. So my first hardcore show was Earth Crisis and Strife. And then I kind of discovered like the local scene, like Battery and Damnation D. And that's when I really kind of fell in love with this kind of music.
I'm so jealous. I'm 38. Tony's soon to be 40. I'm not going to say his birthday, but we're so jealous of that era. Like we're like, what, maybe 4 or 5 years behind you. But man, that like mid 90s sweet spot, I think about it more than that's my Roman Empire. You saw that meme, like guys think about the Roman Empire. I think about that scene, and I think I have a problem.
It was really a beautiful time, man. But I mean, I think that's kind of common with everybody. Like I've always wished that I had been around 5 years earlier and had seen more shows in the 80s and stuff, So, but yeah, I'm definitely really happy I got to get into it when I did. It was really a special time.
Yeah, you always want to see the stuff that influenced you, right? I wish I was around when they were playing that Hole in the Wall venue in 1986. And no, I can't be, but I listened to them, I loved them, and now maybe they help color what I do as a musician. There's an influence taken there. What got you to figuring out how to, be a vocalist in this scene? Because it's not easy. There's a lot that sounds the same, there's a lot that sounds different, but everybody has to have their own way into it, and then to be able to keep it up for this long.
Yeah, I mean, so it took me a really, really long time. And it's funny you mentioned keeping it up, like the sustainability aspect of it was something I didn't think about at all for the first 15 years of the band or something, like it was because, what drew me into being a front person, being a singer was, seeing these like hardcore bands, and there was always this like vulnerability of just like a dude up there screaming his ass off about something that meant something to him, and it wasn't really like putting on a show, it wasn't really like performing, but it was also performing, because it is also someone on a stage performing their music. It's just always felt more personal to me than say like Axl Rose up there, or David Lee Roth doing jumping jacks or something, so that's what really drew me into it, was like seeing how personal it was and how vulnerable it made these people. And like, so that's kind of what I emulated in the beginning. And then over the years, I kind of started to realize like, hey, like David Lee Roth is pretty badass. And, like these Axl Rose is pretty, these like all these rock stars and showmanship was something that I started to kind of like think about. So, 15 years after I got into it. And it happened to be around the same time when I was realizing that like the way I'm singing is not sustainable at all. Like I was losing my voice on every tour because I was putting zero technique into it. I was just screaming as hard as I could. And, I started to consciously think about it. I started to do some vocal lessons. I started to work with some really talented singers like Devin Townsend, who produced us a few records. And, I started to realize that like it is just an instrument like anything else. And, if you do the same thing over and over again, you're never going to get any better at it. And, also I would have probably not been able to sing if I had kept screaming as hard as I could. So I learned a lot about technique and how to preserve my voice and not run out of breath. And now I kind of incorporate all kinds of sounds into the vocals.
Well, I think when you started, a lot of that like knowledge wasn't out there. Like I know the Zenith screaming, that probably wasn't around. That was early 2000s. Like it wasn't that reference point. And I remember in the documentary, Mike saying that you guys would drive around in his dad's Bronco and you'd like scream into a pillow or something. And like that, John was not thinking about longevity, I imagine,
Not at all. And even the John 10, 12 years after that wasn't thinking about it either. Like it really wasn't, like you said, it really wasn't, no one knew about it. Like no one knew that there were different kinds of screams. No one knew that certain screams were fry screams, certain screams were false chord screams, or all that kind of science behind screaming came out way later. So, and it's interesting. I still don't know much about it. Like when we were doing the last record, this guy David Benitez, I think his last name. He's up in Massachusetts, but he does like Extreme Vocal Institute. He does screaming lessons for people, and he happened to be in the studio, and I was like, hey, what kind of scream am I doing? Like I don't even know. And he's like, oh yeah, that's like Fry, but with a little bit of this mixed in. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I had no idea.
Yeah, that topic has come up a couple times for us. I know Jesse Leach struggled with it for a little while and has since kind of figured out that voice. And it's always been interesting to me because it's a taxing thing, I would imagine, especially when you're on tour. You have to be really cognizant of when you use your voice and how you use it, because you've got to use it that night for a while, an hour, in a pretty rugged fashion. So yeah, it's always been interesting to me.
But I mean, the thing is, when you do it right and when you can hear yourself and you sing right, it's not much harder on your voice than actually singing or talking. It's like when you do it right, you can sustain it. You could do it however long, you want to. So.
And that's interesting because, and this has come up in previous conversations, but for the normal person to even do like one song of karaoke, their voice is gone. So it just shows you like technique and probably repetition, building those muscles is so key.
Yeah.
So when you're around this long, early on, we'd like to think there's somebody or a couple of bands that you saw and you were like, that's how you're a professional. That's how you have the stage banter. That's what you do on tour with fans or with whatever. Was there a band or a couple of bands like that you guys saw that you're like, all right, we're learning from here. We're pulling from this to make sure that we're doing it the right way too?
Yeah, I think kind of the big turning point for us was the first really big tour we did was the Ozfest in 2004. And, before then I had always been, like I said before, this, kind of anti-rock star. But on that tour, it was, it was Black Sabbath original lineup. It was Judas Priest. It was Slayer.
Crazy.
Slipknot. Right when the big hit came out, Duality. And then the second stage was all these kind of bands that were around the same time as us, like Unearth, Every Time I Die, just a shitload of bands. And so we started realizing like you really have to like work a crowd. I had never really taken it seriously. And even when I did the tour, I feel like that was like when I was still in my kind of rebellious punk anti-rock star phase. So I was like, almost making a joke out of it. Everyone would be like, turn to the motherfucker next to you and beat the shit out of him or something. And so the way I processed that was, I was like, I don't want to be like that. So I would be like, turn to the motherfucker next to you and give him a big hug, and
yes,
ended up making like a little bit of a joke about it. But then I started to realize like, man, these guys are having like way better shows than us, and it was like, okay, so maybe I need to start taking this a little bit seriously and maybe think about, trying to put on a show and being a showman. And like, it can feel cheesy sometimes, but if you mean it, and if your goal is like, hey, I want to have people have the best possible time at this show, then it ceases to be cheesy, and it ends up just being like an actual authentic part of your performance.
How good's your memory, John?
How good is my memory? It's not, when it comes to like tours and stuff, it's not great because they all kind of blur together. Like I partied a lot in my 20s, in the early days of the band. So, but I don't know. Do you have a test for me? Or
I do, yeah. So you mentioned Ozfest 04. You guys. So one thing I love about you guys, you play that big stage, but then you're playing off dates too. You're playing Ozfest off dates. One of those dates was Portland, Maine, 2004, at the Big Easy. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Not even close. It was a very small venue, 200 cap. The kind of in a basement, and it was amazing.
So it was just us. It wasn't with other.
No, there were a couple locals. There was a band called Amaranthus, or I can't remember, but they opened. I can't remember, maybe a couple others. But I think it was just you guys from Ozfest.
Okay. That makes sense because we were one of the last bands added. So, you know, by the time we were added, a lot of the off-day packages had already teamed up. So we were kind of like, we did a lot of our own off-day shows. So, sorry, but I don't remember.
Yeah, that I'm sure is that room is gone now. We loved that room growing up. It was a tiny little hole in the wall venue that used to see some crazy shows, and I'm sure that one was pretty wild.
I think that the 200 capacity is kind of like the perfect, you know, breeding ground for having like an insane shows, you know, like it's so easy to pack those rooms and for you to have this crazy experience and with the sweat dripping from the ceiling and everything. So we've had some of my favorite shows we've ever played have been like that.
And it's kind of that, yeah, you're right. It is that sweet spot because there's still a stage, there's still lights, there's still a killer sound system, but it's just intimate. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds better in smaller rooms too, especially with heavy music.
Totally.
So you guys, 30 years, let's talk new album, Perpetual Terminal. At the time of recording, it is not out yet. And I think this episode will drop right before it actually comes out. So it's coming out February 23rd on MNRK Heavy. Mm-hmm. We love the album. We get a copy of it. We love it. It feels like a complete album. The buzz online from what you've released echoes that. Like I was reading comments like, this band doesn't miss. Love that they brought the melody back. Continue to deliver. So do you read that stuff, or do you feel that same sentiment that you know, still bringing it?
Yeah, I mean, I do read that stuff. You know, sometimes reading the comments is terrible for your
totally, yeah,
mental health and everything, because you know you can see 100 great comments and then you see one comment that's like, singer looks like a dork, you know, and you're like, no, that's what you remember, of course. But no, it has been really overwhelmingly positive. And it does feel like, I mean, I think what we put out specifically because like the first song, Perpetual Terminal, that we dropped, we wanted to put that out first because, you know, we feel like that song is basically like the career of Darkest Hour, like squished into one song. And so that's why I can see why it elicits this response of, you know, oh, this is like classic DH, you know, they have the melody and everything, because that's kind of what we were going for. Like we wanted to basically, yeah, do the history of the band in one song, but then the record really kind of goes, there's a lot of new stuff for us too. And that's kind of really what I'm super excited for. The single that's going to drop the day that we release is really different.
That's exciting. So you come to the table with, let's write a song that encapsulates everything we've ever done. How do you come up with that idea?
I think it just kind of turned into that naturally. Like, you know, we had, you know, the riffs that were going into that song were just like, oh, this sounds like 15-year-old Darkest Hour riff, you know? And then we kind of like built the song around that. And, you know, it's not like we really set out for that, but it just ended up turning into that, you know?
Does that give you guys like a kick and a jolt, like a rejuvenation? Because I know I was reading about like the theme of the album, that at the end of the day, everything is terminal, but we're still doing this. We still love it. So I'm just curious, does that rejuvenate you to just keep going? You know, you hear this riff and you're like, man, that's that sweet Darkest Hour riff, you know?
To be honest, it doesn't.
Wow.
Well, personally for me, I like the more different stuff, you know? I mean, I love it all. It's all our band and I stand behind it 100%. But the things that really excite me aren't the things that where you're like, oh, this sounds like Darkest Hour. The things that excite me are the things that are like, oh, this sounds like something else, you know, or something new, you know? So
Was there anything in particular this time around that you wanted to try new?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do a lot more. Like, I really enjoy singing, like singing pretty, like clean singing. And I think we did a lot of that on the self-titled record, maybe too much. And then we kind of reacted on Godless Prophets by having like no clean singing in it. And we wanted a really brutal, raw, heavy album. And now we're kind of reacting from that, being like, well, you know, we should have more melody. And like I really do enjoy singing, like singing clean, but I really wanted to kind of do it in like a different way than, you know, the classic formulaic metalcore version of having like a, you know, screaming in the verse and then having a poppy, singy chorus.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. It's definitely not that.
I wanted to change it around a little bit and be like, oh, you know, how about singing during the verses, and then the second half of the song is all heavy or something, you know? So yeah, that's stuff that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Although, you know, I don't know, it's gonna be tough to read those comments.
Always is, because all you need is the one, right? We've been there.
Yeah.
Well, I know on One with the Void in Mausoleum, I would say those are probably the best showcases of you not screaming, you know, more doing clean vocals and whatnot. But they hit in a crazy way. Like they maybe hit you even harder than you when you're screaming.
I mean, to me, I think it's more intimate. It's definitely more vulnerable. You know, like if there's like it for me, since I've been screaming my whole life, it's getting up there and screaming in front of people is just normal. You know, it's just, I'm not going to say it's not boring because it's still really exciting to me, but it is that standard. Like in to most singers, thinking about getting up and screaming in front of people is like, whoa, shit, that's crazy. But for me, like thinking about, you know, One with the Void, that's going to be the next single. And, you know, we're going to perform that one. So, you know, just thinking about standing up there and me just singing and the music's kind of quiet. It's like scary in a good way, you know, like it really, and it brings me back to like what I liked about seeing hardcore front people in the beginning, which, like I said, is that vulnerability aspect, and seeing that this is just someone kind of like pouring themselves out to their song.
That's an interesting way to think about it, just because you've done this for so long now. You've got to try to find a way to bare your soul a little bit in a new fashion, in a way that you haven't done it before, whether it be on the record or in a live show. And it sounds like you did that, which is really cool.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, that song in particular, One with the Void, it has the clean singing, but then there's this kind of build up throughout it, and then it hits you with the classic Darkest Hour sing along. You know, for lack of better words, that'll hit live. If you said you're going to play it live,
Yeah,
that'll hit. I think that'll, when it's all said and done, whenever that is, I think people will gravitate towards that song.
cool. I hope so, man.
So this album, was there anything where you guys, after you finished it, were like, fuck, man, we did that. We just did that. I don't know where the inspiration came from, but we just did that. Was anything like that?
I don't know. I mean, I think so we've been working on the record for so long, and I think there was one moment where, you know, I was kind of, I didn't know the direction that the album was going to go. We had been working on it for 5 years. We had so many different demos. We had reworked all these different demos. And I flew over to DC, and I was in Mike's basement, and he was like, I think we have a record. And I was like, you're crazy. We have like, you know, only a handful of ideas that I'm like really stoked on. And he was like, check this out. And he, you know, he had gone and rearranged all this different stuff, and he had put all the demo ideas in an order that finally felt like an album to me. And that was, I don't know, that was probably during the pandemic. That was probably like, yeah, like in 2020. And so, yeah, there that was kind of like, because, you know, at that point, yeah, we'd been writing for years, and to me, it didn't feel like we were making a lot of progress. But then all of a sudden, he worked everything and ordered it to and I was like, man, how are these even the same songs? He had taken parts from songs, taken them out and put them into other songs, and it's just somehow worked, because I mean, Mike is like hardest working dude in heavy music. He's in his basement every day working on this band. So that was a really cool turning point. And then that was when, I started to get really excited, and then we started to really kind of get together a lot more often and start really making the record.
He's always come across as like an evil genius kind of guy. Like, I don't know, I just get that vibe about Mike. It just, the gears are always spinning and the output is always like, why, it's like, how did he do that?
Yeah, he's always working on the band. Like, even in his sleep, he's like working on the band. So it's awesome. Props to him.
Hell yeah. So yeah, you're gonna go out on tour too, right? Late February, Leap Day.
Yeah.
You start on Leap Day, which is, and how many tours have started on February 29th? That's what I want to know.
I just made that. I just noticed that like 2 days ago. So it's funny you mentioned that. I was like, oh, yeah, February 29th. Wow.
Yeah. I just noticed it looking at the notes because we talked about this last night to get ready and prep to talk to you, and it just hit me now. I'm like, oh wow, that starts on Leap Day. That's exciting. Yeah, extra day of touring.
Exactly. It's the longest tour we've done in, man, definitely since before the pandemic, but probably for years before the pandemic, we haven't really done like a full, proper, 5+ week loop around the whole, US and Canada. So we're super, super excited, man. It's going almost everywhere. I mean, it never goes everywhere. Of course, anytime you announce a tour, someone's like, what the hell? No Iowa?
No Portland, Maine?
Portland, Maine? I mean, I'm sure you guys must be used to it,
We're used to it, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really going to be the longest tour we've done in a while. It's going to be the longest set that we've ever played. It's, something like 14 songs. It's, well over an hour. So yeah, it's really going to be, really special. And we're doing a lot of new stuff. We're doing, at this point we have 10 albums out. So every time you put a new album out, there's just a struggle of like, you're not going to be able to play a lot of songs, and you're going to not be able to play everyone's favorite songs. So, we try to like make it so that we always try to tailor the set so that there's, people who have always liked the band will like it. People who just got into the band will also like it. So we're trying our best to do that.
Yeah. So you got, who's it? Mouth for War, Filth is Eternal, I Am, and Some Yuri opening across the different. So it's stacked lineup. I don't know how you're doing it. Like, I know we're a little younger, but the idea of driving across the country, yelling for 14 songs every night, man, I don't know. What changes for you compared to maybe years ago? Like less partying, more vocal support, less talking during the day.
Definitely less partying. I can't. I'm 44 now, and in our 20s we partied every night. It was wild, but that's something that I can't do anymore. Like, the most important thing for me to be able to tour is to get proper sleep. So, we're doing it on one of these bandwagons, which is kind of like a mini tour bus, but we each have our own bunk. So, we're able to really get proper sleep, as opposed to like doing the van in hotels, and you're going to you're getting to your hotel at 2 a.m, and then you have to check out at 6 a.m, and then you have to try to sleep in the van on the way to the show. And like, that definitely is, it's something we did our whole career, but it's way harder to play every night when you're getting advancing in your age.
Right. Sleep is so important as I age for me, so I totally relate to that. Like, if I stay up till 1 o'clock tonight, tomorrow is shot. It just is. Like, so I can't imagine trying to do that, while sleeping in a van and not my own bed.
Yeah, the difference is really funny. I mean, where it used to be every night everyone's hanging with people from the show, doing shots, partying, whatever. Now, after the show, everyone's just kind of like sitting there. People are already passed out or reading a book or making a sandwich. And like, it's like, that's where we're at now,
I love hearing this stuff because we've heard like it used to go from that to, all right, where's the closest coffee shop, or when can I sneak in a nap? When's load-in? Because I need to take a nap before that.
Yeah. Especially for vocals, like I've found that sleep is just by far the most important thing.
So obviously still excited doing this 30 years in, touring on support of a new album. Anything else you're really looking forward to in the coming weeks here with the album coming out?
I mean, really just the response, like I can't wait for people to hear it. I think, the 2 songs that we dropped are really just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So I really can't wait for people to kind of dig into like the meat of this album and really see what it's all about. And I just super excited for the world to hear it, man. Like I think Mike's getting the record shipped to him today, actually. So we're nice. I live in Europe, so I won't be over there for another couple weeks. So I won't get to hold it for another 3 weeks, but that's always such a like special feeling after you've put 5+ years into making an album to like just look at it, hold it. It's a beautiful feeling.
That's got to be that we did that moment, right? Like look at it. Here it is. We finally it all came to fruition. This started as ideas and conversations, and now I'm holding it. That's so cool.
Exactly, man.
Well, hey, most bands don't get to 10, and most that do get to 10, the albums generally suck. Think about it. I thought about it the other day when I saw that this was number 10, and I was surprised, and then I did the math, and I'm like, yeah, it is 10. But most 10th albums from bands don't hit like this. And I know when this comes out, the album won't be out, but it'll be out, I think, on the Friday of this episode comes out. So just wait a few days. You're gonna love it. I think it's tough to stack it, but I think it's one of the most complete albums you guys have done. And I think you had to put out the previous albums to get to this. And hopefully that makes sense when people listen to it, because there's classic stuff, there's new takes, it's got it all. The imagery's great. I love the theme of the album, the name of the album, the opener, killer closer too. It's complete. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Cool. That's kind of what we were going for. So thank you, man. I think that like, it's always a goal of mine to grow in a way that for the better. So, I know like you said, there's a lot of bands, put out their first album and it's amazing. But then it's just kind of like all downhill from there. But I've always like, one of my favorite bands is the Beatles, and they're kind of the perfect example of, for me, each record they put out was like better than the last one. Like their last record, Let It Be, to me is, I think, the best one. Abbey Road's right before that, I think, is like the second best one. So that's kind of always been a big influence on me and a big inspiration, is to like grow in a good way,
Hell yeah. Awesome. All right, John, thank you for coming on with us today. Go check out Perpetual Terminal this Friday, February 23rd, out on MNRK Heavy, and go see him on tour starting on Leap Day. And yeah, we're excited for all that Darkest Hour has got to offer us here in the next couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a great year.
Thanks, John. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to Podioslave. We are at Podioslave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the places that you can find us on social media. Facebook, Podioslave Podcast. YouTube, Podioslave Podcast there. Email us at podioslavepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you want to become a supporter, click on the link at the bottom of the episode and give us $1, give us $5. It keeps the lights on, keeps us going. We really appreciate that stuff. Thank you.
Playing with Unearth and Darkest Hour this weekend, and I realized I've been playing shows with both of those bands since around 96, 97-ish. Overcast played with Darkest Hour in a squat in DC where, oh man, Slave Bomb one of my favorite people alive. But that day we're loading upstairs into a actual like Rasta squat, like just all these Rasta dudes just hanging out in this abandoned like building somewhere in DC. And we get up there and they asked us like, hey man, can we borrow your cabinets? And we're like, yeah, nice to meet you guys. Sure. Use whatever. We're on tour. And they borrowed them to make full stacks. Like, and immediately I was like, I love and hate you guys so much. I was like, that's perfect. Right. And since then they've been like some of our best friends.